Hey, hi, hello, my friend. It's Jenny. Who else would it be? There's no other host of this podcast. I am so happy to be chatting with you today from, I don't know if anyone recognizes the beautiful backdrop, but the last time I was here, I think was 2 or 3 summers ago. I am in Texas and very happy to be here on a little bit of a vacation because before now, I hadn't taken a vacation for almost 2 years, and I paid for it because this past spring going into the summer, I just kind of stayed chronically sick. Sinus infection, flu, bronchitis, not getting better. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that I didn't take time to listen to my body and to rest. So I decided to come home in the month of July and rest and be with family. And it's just been fantastic. But I realized that this is the first episode where I'm wearing my Aura ring. I think I need to turn it this way, actually. I've only had it for like 4 days and I really love it. You can track your sleep and your heart rate and your hormones, which actually my friend Megan shared with me that you could do that. And I said, that's so cool. And I love learning more about my body and how I can tune into it and treat it better. So I haven't had it, like I said, I've only had it for a few days, but excited to see how I can cycle track and improve my sleep and well being. And that's exciting and not really what we're talking about today. Well, I guess well being and living is what we always talk about on this podcast. But I would love to have like a hormonal specialist or a doctor that touches on all of the things that I just mentioned. But I digress. Today, we are not talking about our relationship with ourselves, but our relationship with other people. And I'm doing something a little different, which is taking a question that I got from a listener and allowing the episode to be a kind of Q&A. Here's our question, everyone. Hey Jenny, watched your YouTube video. Would be super curious to hear what the dating culture / making friends in Paris is like. The differences, if it's harder as a foreigner, if you're expected to be fluent, etc. If you haven't already talked about those. Well, I'm glad you asked because I haven't talked about any of them and I am dying to. I produced a TikTok series for my friend Laura, who is an amazing dancer at the Moulin Rouge in Paris called Pardon My French Man. And this series on TikTok, you can go look it up, is Laura and her co host asking foreign men their opinion on different topics and situations in dating culture. And it was really fun to produce this series and come up with ideas. But when I started traveling, I was single and how do you say this? When I started traveling in France, um, it was an exploration of myself. And so I think when you are exploring who you are, other people mirror that back. So I met a lot of really incredible men in different countries and different places. And I think that the experience of having discussions and moments with different people can be really special, especially if you've only ever stayed in your home country or in your hometown or in your home state. So I think no matter where you are in the world, there's always going to be an opportunity to learn from someone who is different than you, whether that's romantically or friendship or business wise. But with Frenchmen in particular, I would say that there are three major differences from American men to Frenchmen. I would say the first one would be Frenchmen weren't raised in a patriarchy. They weren't raised to believe in any kind of way that women were to be controlled or property, at least boys my age. I say this as a 29-year-old who dated people who were more or less within my age range. So yeah, number one would be the patriarchal difference. Number two would be, I guess it's kind of correlated with number one, but they believe in 50-50 for the most part. A big part of French culture is, their pillars, which is égalité, fraternité, and liberté, which is liberty, fraternity, and equality. And so they do believe in equality and they believe that women can take care of themselves, that they have just as many rights as men do. And my cultural formation classes that I had to take for my visa, I learned that in schools, the way that they correlate parents and parenting roles, that there really isn't any roles. It's, a mom is a mom and a dad is a dad, and they're both equals, and no one's better, no one's the leader, no one is designated to earn more or stay home or anything like that. So that definitely affects the way that I think men treat you on a quote unquote date. Which brings me to point three, that dating is not nearly as formal in France as it is in the United States, which I guess you could take dating in the United States and split that up into like hookup culture or like intentional dating culture. And the longer that I've been away, the more that I've noticed that hookup culture and formal dating culture have to be distinguished quite quickly. Like if a guy or a girl says like, I'm not looking for anything serious, it's usually pretty early on. Or if they are looking for something serious, it's kind of established like, this is what I would like out of this situation. And in France, you don't really define the relationship ever unless you like distinctly ask, which takes them aback. Like, almost putting a like wet blanket on the romance of like, why do you have to know where this is going? How do we know that it's going anywhere? How do we know that it's going to last forever? I'm not by any means saying that French people aren't loyal. I also think that this is just my experience. So all of that with a grain of salt. But going to the differences in friendships, my friendships with French people, both men and women, mostly women, have been very, very different than they are in the United States. I am watching Hunting Wives, or I started watching Hunting Wives, but it's a little bit stark for my taste. But even on the first episode, I noticed how the depiction of what a Texas woman portrays herself as in a friendship is so much different than in the French culture. Like a French woman would never say, oh, we're going to be besties, or, oh, girl, I love you so much. It's just not a normal thing to do. And similar to how people date one another, everything is a little bit more discreet and mysterious, which in some ways I think can be really exciting. But I know that a big cliche or a big misconception about French people is that they're very cold and rude. And yes, just like in Texas, everything can be big and women can say, bless your heart, and everyone is religious. Not all of those things are true. So one of my best friends in the entire world is a French woman, and she is not cold or rude by any means. She's one of the most warm, lovely people that I've ever met. But when I did meet her, I wasn't sure if she liked me. One, because of the language barrier, which I'll get to in a second, but two, because it's just not a overly hospitable, showy, in a physical realm type of culture. And that's okay, because one of my closest friends in France is actually from Argentina. And we've discussed how a little bit more similar his culture and my culture are versus French. Because when you live in a neighborhood with French people, yes, you can start to become friends with them, but you don't have to. And then when you live in Texas, today, even when I took my dog to the vet, a man opened the door for me and he was like, have a blessed day. And I just thought that would never happen in France, not because the people are hateful, but because it's not a part of their cultural language. But for example, it is a part of their culture to say hello, like as a greeting to every single person that you see. Even a homeless person you would say hello to because it's just a cultural decency. And when I first moved there, I didn't fully follow this. And it was so evident how looked down on, because it made me look rude. But then again, like they don't see the things that I see as rude. And there's just a lot of nuance to it. And I'm sure that I'll write a blog post to articulate this a little bit more into solid points. But overall, I would say that those are the biggest differences, that France lives in nuance and Americans love to live in organization. I think for me, at least, when I leave and come back, it's really good for my spirit to figure out like, who am I apart from where I'm living? Because We're not beings of the environment that we're in, we're beings of the universe. And I know that that sounds a little woo woo, but the love of God doesn't exist in one specific culture. And I think, especially when we get to the other side of eternity, we are going to speak in the language of love. And I don't know what that sounds like, but I'm sure that I will speak better the language of love than I will of French. But I didn't hit on the point that French, the language itself, has been a huge barrier for me, and something that I hate to say, I'm slightly embarrassed that it's been difficult for me to latch on to and learn the language. I wish that I could have learned it faster, but another difference in our cultures is that Americans aren't taught, or we are taught, but it's not really implemented into our vocabulary that we're ever going to leave, that it's ever going to be necessary to say, oh, well, I'm learning Spanish because I'm going somewhere else. I'm going to a Spanish speaking country, or maybe I'll come in contact with someone who speaks Spanish or French or Russian or whatever it is. And I think that that part of me has a lot of learning to do still. And I do my best. I do have friends that are like Canadian French, or they grew up with one French mom or a French dad, and then like an American mom or an American dad or whatever, or they grew up speaking a different language, Spanish, Italian, and it was a little bit easier for them to pick up French. But French is not an easy language, but it's not so much about the language itself as it is putting in the effort and understanding their nuances. When you start to understand like their phrases and their metaphors and those things, it becomes evident why they speak in those terms. It's also endearment and humor. So I think it's more of a token of importance rather than knowledge, if that makes sense. So that was a fun, short little Q&A episode and life update. I'm really excited about this new era of Cageless. New YouTube and podcast episodes will be coming out along with articles on Substack. So yes, love you guys so much. That's the first time I've said it this episode. If you have a question that you would like me to answer on Cageless, you can submit it in the show notes. I will put a link, and doesn't have to have anything to do with culture or dating. It can have to do with spirituality or womanhood or money or animals or body image or any of the topics that you care about, because what you care about, I care about. And I love you. Second time. And I'll see you soon. Make sure to subscribe. That was the last thing I needed to say. Love you. Third time. Bye.